A paralyzed wild foal dragged itself through the Nevada dust, only to stop at one man's door, the very man who'd forgotten how to live. They said nothing survived out here. Not the crops, not the dreams, not even love. But that morning, as the sun rose over the silent ranch, Sam Whitaker heard a sound crawling through the dust. When he opened his door, he found a creature half dead, eyes begging for mercy. And somehow, it was him who needed saving. The desert had stopped being beautiful a long time ago. By late June, the Nevada sun didn't rise anymore. It burned. The air above the cracked earth shimmered like water that would never come. Every breath scraped the throat. Every sound, wind, rust, the hum of flies, seemed to carry the same dry note of exhaustion. Sam Whitaker leaned against the splintered post by his porch, a half-empty mug of coffee cooling in his hand. He'd lived alone out here for 6 years, since the mine closed, and the woman who once called this place home had been taken by an illness he couldn't pay to cure. The house was small, patched together with tin and silence. Out in the pasture, the fences leaned like tired old men, and the well pump squealed whenever he worked it, coughing up more dust than water. He wasn't waiting for anything that morning. He never was. He just stood there, watching the horizon breathe. Then he heard it. At first it was so faint it could have been the wind dragging a stick across the dirt. A broken rhythm. A sound that didn't belong to the desert's lazy pulse. Sam set the mug down. The noise came again, closer this time. Something moving, scraping, stopping, then moving again. He squinted toward the open plain beyond the corral. Heat rippled the air until everything wavered like a mirage. And then he saw it. A small shape, low and trembling, forcing itself forward inch by inch. The sun caught the movement, a shimmer of dusty bronze, and for a second he thought it was a coyote crawling. But no, it was too still between movements, too fragile. Sam walked off the porch, boots stirring pale clouds around his feet. As he neared the fence, the shape shifted again, and he felt his stomach tighten. It was a foal, a wild one, no more than a month old. Its hind legs dragged uselessly behind, the hooves raw from the ground. Its chest heaved as if every breath was borrowed. Blood had turned to a dark crust along its flank, mixing with sand until it looked carved from the same desert that was killing it. Sam froze. He hadn't seen a wild Mustang this close in years. They stayed north now, following the dry riverbeds where ranchers hadn't fenced the land. Seeing one here was like finding a ghost that hadn't learned it was dead. The foal lifted its head. Its eyes caught the light, amber and alive, wide with something that wasn't fear. It was pleading. Sam's throat went dry. He'd seen that look before, on a night he refused to remember, when the light ignites. Someone's eyes begged him to do something, anything, and he hadn't. He took a step back, then another. "No," he muttered to himself. "Don't start this." The foal tried to move again, front legs clawing forward. Its breath came in short bursts that ended in soft, desperate whimpers. Sam turned away, walked back toward the porch. He could still hear it, each scrape against the dirt like a small hand knocking on a door he didn't want to open. He stopped halfway to the steps. The sun pressed hard against his back, filling the silence with heat. He told himself the same thing he always did. It's not my fight. But the desert has a way of holding you in place, of whispering when you try not to listen. Behind him, the foal gave a faint cry, not loud, just enough to slice through the hum of cicadas. Sam's jaw tightened. He looked at the old metal bucket sitting by the pump, half full from the morning draw. It wasn't much, barely enough to get him through the day. He thought about the walk to town, 30 miles east, where diesel prices had tripled and water cost more than gas. He thought about how everything out here took something from you, and how every time you gave, you lost a little more. But that sound came again. Soft, broken, relentless. He exhaled, long and slow, then picked up the bucket. When he reached the Foal, it had stopped moving. Its body shuddered in the heat, sides rising in shallow rhythm. Sam crouched down, shadow falling over its back. The smell of dust and blood mixed in the air, a smell he knew too well. "Damn it," he whispered. He tilted the bucket, let a thin stream of water trickle near the foal's muzzle. At first, nothing. Then a twitch. The tongue flicked, weak but alive. It drank, one drop at a time, until the dirt beneath its chin turned dark and sticky. Sam poured slower, careful not to waste. Each sip felt like a confession. When the bucket was empty, he stared at the last bead clinging to the rim, then at the small creature whose life might hang on it. The foal blinked once, twice, eyes cloudy yet stubborn. Its breathing steadied, barely. He set the bucket down and wiped his mouth with the back of his hand. "You picked the wrong door, kid," he murmured. Still, he couldn't walk away. The heat was turning brutal now, the kind that made the air buzz. Sam grabbed an old tarp from the fence, and after a long sigh, slid his arms beneath the foal's narrow chest. It was lighter than he expected. Bones and willpower, nothing more. When he lifted, it made a faint sound, half breath, half prayer. He carried it through the open gate toward the barn. Each step sent dust swirling around his boots. Inside, the air was stale, filled with the ghost smell of hay and oil. He laid the foal on a blanket near the wall, where the light filtered through cracks in thin gold lines. For a moment he just stood there, staring down at it. He could hear his own pulse in the stillness. "Guess we're both half dead," he said finally. The foal twitched an ear, as if it heard him. Sam poured the last ounce of water into an old coffee tin, set it by the foal's head, and stepped back into the sunlight. His shirt clung to his skin. The desert wind tugged at the brim of his hat, whispering through the fence wires like a voice too old to care. He looked out across the endless stretch of sand, where nothing grew anymore, and said quietly to no one, "I don't know why you came here, but I suppose we'll see." Behind him, in the half-dark of the barn, a fragile breath stirred again, the sound of something refusing to give up. And for the first time in years, Sam didn't feel entirely alone. By the time the sun reached its cruelest height, the air over Sam's ranch had turned white with heat, the kind that bent the horizon and made the world waver like it was trying to disappear. Inside the barn, the little foal lay half-hidden in the shadows, ribs rising and falling under a thin film of dust. Sam sat on an overturned crate, elbows on his knees, watching it breathe. The bucket stood empty beside him, its hollow clang still echoing in his head. He hadn't meant to care. Out here, caring was expensive. Water was life, and life cost too much. The radio on the workbench, cracked and coated in sand, whispered about another week of triple-digit temperatures and fuel prices climbing past $5 a gallon. He turned it off. The only thing more useless than news was hope. Still, his eyes kept drifting to the creature on the floor. Every few minutes it stirred, dragging a front hoof against the dirt, as if testing whether the world still answered back. The sound was small, almost tender. Sam felt something tighten in his chest, an ache he hadn't allowed in years. He went outside, blinking hard against the glare. The yard looked like an old photograph, bleached and still. He crossed to the well pump and tried it again. The handle groaned, spat air, then released a trickle of brown water that smelled of metal. He cupped his hands under it, drank, and winced. Not much left. For a long time he stood there, weighing the same question that had haunted him since dawn. What was one life worth in a place where everything was dying? The desert didn't give. It only traded. He looked toward the barn and saw, through the open door, the faintest movement, ears twitching in the dark. "Damn fool," he muttered, not sure if he meant the foal or himself. Inside, he rummaged through the shelves until he found an old canteen, its surface flaking with rust. He shook it, half full. Enough to last him 2 days if he was careful. He turned it over in his hands, feeling the dented metal warm against his skin. Then he heard it again, that soft, broken noise. A plea. He knelt beside the foal. "You're not giving up, huh?" The animal blinked, eyes half open, breathing shallow but steady. Sam unscrewed the cap and poured a few drops into his palm. The foal's tongue brushed his skin. Warm, rough, desperate. It drank what it could, then rested its head against the blanket. Sam felt the touch linger like a brand. He sat back, staring at the last of the water in the canteen. In his mind, he heard his father's old voice. "Never waste what can't be replaced." But another memory crept in, the day his wife had fallen ill, the hospital miles away, and him counting dollars instead of minutes. He'd chosen wrong then. Maybe this was his chance to choose right. He stood abruptly and poured the rest of the water into a shallow pan. The liquid shimmered under the dim light, a small miracle of motion. The foal lifted its head again, drank until there was nothing left, then sighed. A soft, trembling sound that filled the barn like music. When it was done, Sam wiped his hands on his jeans and stared at the dry pan. "Well," he said quietly, "guess that makes us partners now." He spent the rest of the afternoon patching the holes in the roof to block out the worst of the heat. Every hammer strike echoed like thunder in the empty field. From time to time he looked down, making sure the foal was still breathing. Each rise of its chest felt like a heartbeat he didn't know he'd lost. As the light began to fade, he found himself talking, to fill the silence, or maybe to keep the creature company. "Name's Sam," he said, adjusting a nail. "Not that you care. Used to work down in Silver Ridge Mine. Now it's just me and the dust." The foal twitched an ear, and he smiled despite himself. "Yeah, Dust. Maybe that's what I'll call you. Dusty." The name hung in the air, simple and right. The foal shifted, as if acknowledging it. Outside, the wind rose, sweeping thin trails of sand across the yard. Sam wiped the sweat from his brow and leaned against the stall door. He thought of tomorrow, of the empty well, the long drive to Ely, the fuel he couldn't afford. But when he looked at the small body curled on the blanket, he knew he wouldn't leave it to die. Somewhere beneath the grit and the silence, something had already begun to change. Night came slow. The desert cooled, and the smell of iron and hay mixed in the air. Sam lit a single lantern, set it by the stall, and watched the shadows stretch across the floor. The foal slept, its breath light but steady. For the first time in years, the sound of another living thing in the room made the emptiness bearable. He pulled an old blanket over his shoulders and sat down beside the crate. The wind whispered through the cracks in the walls, carrying the far-off hum of the highway. He let his eyes close, the lantern flickering low. Before sleep claimed him, he whispered to the dark, "We'll find water tomorrow, Dusty." Somehow. The foal stirred, a faint sigh in reply. And that's how it began. Not with hope, but with the smallest act of mercy in a world that had forgotten what mercy sounded like. Morning came slow, dragging its tired light across the desert. The color of the sky was neither blue nor gold, just the faded gray of old tin. Another day promising heat without mercy. Sam woke to the sound of slow breathing. For a second, he didn't know where he was. Then he saw the shape by the wall, the little foal curled beneath the lantern's shadow, chest moving, alive. He pushed himself up from the crate, bones cracking like dry wood. "Well, you made it through the night," he muttered, voice rough from sleep. The foal stirred, head lifting slightly. Its eyes had lost some of that empty glass look. They blinked, weak but aware. Sam couldn't remember the last time something in this barn had looked back at him. He reached for the bucket and remembered it was still empty. The well had given up days ago. He'd have to drive to the nearest pump outside Ely, a 40-mile round trip. Diesel wasn't cheap, and the truck drank it like whiskey. Still, he'd made a promise. To himself or to the creature, he wasn't sure. "Hold tight, Dusty," he said. "Don't go dying while I'm gone." He poured the last half cup from his thermos into an old tin pan and slid it toward the foal. It drank slow, careful, as if it knew every drop mattered. Then Sam grabbed his hat, stepped outside, and faced the long white road that ran through his land like a scar. By the time he got back, it was near noon. The canisters in the truck bed rattled full, hot to the touch. When he opened the barn door, the smell hit him. Sweat, iron, and dust thick enough to taste. Dusty's head jerked up. The animal's breathing was heavy but steady, its ears twitching at the sound of his boots. Sam knelt and poured the water into the trough he'd scrubbed clean that morning. The sound of it, cool and real, filled the small space like music. The foal drank until the trough went half empty. Sam leaned back against the wall, watching the way its throat worked. Each swallow was a small victory. He couldn't help the faint smile that crept onto his face. "Easy, kid. You'll make yourself sick." When it was done, he started tending to the wounds. He'd picked up a roll of gauze from the feed store and a bottle of antiseptic that smelled like hospital corridors and memories he didn't want. He cut away the crusted bandage, cleaned the leg, and felt the foal flinch under his touch. "I know," he whispered. "Hurts like hell." He worked slow, steady, wrapping the leg in layers until the blood stopped seeping through. Then he stepped back to look at what he'd done. It wasn't perfect. Hell, it wasn't even good. But it was something. Outside, a hawk circled, calling once before drifting beyond the ridgeline. Sam felt the quiet settle around him again. The day dragged on. He repaired the stall door, found a working fan in the shed, and ran an extension cord across the floor. The blades turned lazily, pushing warm air that still felt better than none. Dusty lay still, eyes following him as he moved, Sam talked while he worked, the words coming easier now. "Used to be a time I thought this place could grow something," he said, tightening a screw. "Planted barley once, got nothing but sand and regrets." The foal twitched its ears, and he chuckled. "You're better company than most folks I've known." Late afternoon brought a shimmer of light through the gaps in the wall. Sam took a break, sat by the door, and stared out at the horizon. The world was quiet except for the low hum of the fan and the occasional shift of hooves behind him. For the first time in years, the silence didn't feel like punishment. It felt like waiting. When dusk rolled in, the heat lifted just enough for the air to breathe again. Sam lit the lantern, adjusted it low. The foal was dozing, its legs twitching as if it dreamed of running. He reached over, brushed the short fur on its neck. "You're tougher than you look," he said softly. "Guess we both are." He ate a cold can of beans for dinner, leaning against the stall rail. Out of habit, he poured a little water into a tin bowl for himself, but left most of it for Dusty. As he watched the light flicker across the barn boards, his mind drifted. He thought about the years spent watching the sky for rain that never came. About the people who'd left because they were smart enough to. About how he'd stayed, not because he was brave, but because he didn't know where else to go. When he glanced back at the foal, its eyes were open again, fixed on him. There was a faint shine in them now, not fear, but recognition, maybe trust. He wasn't sure which scared him more. "Don't look at me like that," he said quietly. "I ain't no savior." Dusty blinked, slow and certain, as if to disagree. He stayed up long past midnight, listening to the desert breathe. The wind pressed against the walls, whispering through the cracks. Somewhere out there, a coyote called, long and low. Sam closed his eyes, hearing the echo fade into nothing. When he opened them again, the foal had lifted its head, watching the same door he was. The animal's nostrils flared, catching a scent beyond the barn. Sam followed its gaze, but saw only darkness. Still, he couldn't shake the feeling that something, or someone, was coming. He set his hand on the shotgun leaning by the wall, just in case. The desert didn't forgive the weak, and kindness was often mistaken for invitation. But the night stayed quiet. The stars burned sharp over the roof, bright enough to hurt. Sam finally eased back onto the crate, rubbing his temples. "You're safe here," he murmured. "For now." Dusty shifted once more, laid its head down, and let out a sigh so deep it felt human. Sam closed his eyes again, letting the rhythm of the breathing lull him. The smell of hay and iron filled the air, and the warmth of the lamp painted both of them in soft gold. Outside, the dry wind moved across the open land, whispering through the sagebrush. It carried no promise of rain, only the faint, fragile sound of life learning to stay. And in that stillness, two creatures, one broken, one worn down by guilt, found a small piece of peace neither had expected to survive the night. The next morning carried a different kind of silence, thicker, heavier, the kind that comes when even the desert holds its breath. Sam was outside, crouched beside the old Chevy, tightening a bolt on the truck's door hinge. His shirt clung to his back, streaked with dust and sweat. The air smelled of rust and oil, the language he spoke best. Inside the barn, the fan hummed low, pushing the same hot air around. Dusty was resting, head down, one ear twitching now and then to the sound of Sam's tools clinking. He didn't hear the engine right away. It was faint at first, buried under the wind, then a hum that didn't belong to the desert. Sam looked up, squinting against the glare. A pale green pickup rolled slowly down the dirt road, tires carving new scars into the sand. He stood, wiped his hands on his jeans, and waited. No one came out this far unless they needed something, or were lost. The truck stopped near the fence, and a woman climbed out. She wore a wide-brimmed hat, a denim shirt rolled to the elbows, and sunglasses that reflected everything but revealed nothing. In one hand, she carried a worn leather medical bag. "Morning," she called, her voice calm but certain. "You Sam Whitaker?" Sam hesitated. "Depends who's asking." "Dr. Nora Hensley, Red Creek Veterinary Clinic. A feed store clerk said you picked up medical supplies yesterday. Thought you might need a hand." He frowned, brushing dirt off his palms. "Didn't call for no doctor." "You didn't have to," she said, glancing toward the barn. "Word gets around when someone's trying to keep a wild foal alive in a heat wave." Sam followed her gaze. "It's under control." Nora stepped closer, her boots sinking into the sand. "You got antibiotics? Saline? Proper bandages?" Sam shifted. "Got what I could afford." She didn't wait for permission. She walked past him, her bag bumping against her hip, and pushed open the barn door. The smell hit her instantly. Iron, sweat, dry hay. Dusty lifted its head, eyes tracking the stranger. "Hey there, little one," she said softly, kneeling beside it. Her movements were steady, practiced. She pulled off her sunglasses, revealing eyes the color of river clay, warm but sharp. Sam stayed by the doorway, arms folded. He didn't like anyone crossing into his space. Nora ran her hands gently along Dusty's legs, checking the wounds. "You cleaned this yourself?" He nodded. "Best I could." "Not bad," she said, glancing up. "For a miner with no training." "Used to fix machines," he replied. "Ain't much different." She gave a half smile. "Machines don't bleed, Mr. Whitaker." Nora opened her bag, laying out gauze and a small bottle of antiseptic. "It's infected but treatable. The cut on the right leg's deep, though. It might have hit a tendon." Sam swallowed hard. "You saying it won't walk again?" "Too early to tell." Her tone stayed calm, professional. "But it wants to live? You can see it in the eyes." He watched her work, the way her hands moved, precise, gentle, efficient. The smell of antiseptic filled the air, sharp enough to sting his nose. Dusty trembled once, but didn't resist. Nora murmured something soft, something that sounded almost like prayer, and the foal's breathing steadied again. When she was done, she stood, brushing the dust from her knees. "You'll need to change the wraps every morning. Keep the wound clean. Don't let flies near it." Sam nodded, silent. She packed her tools and looked around the barn. The patched roof, the crooked beams, the fan humming in the corner. "You live out here alone? Been that way a while? You got family?" He didn't answer right away. "Had." Nora studied him for a moment, but didn't press. "Lonely work, saving something that can't thank you." "Didn't do it for thanks," he said. She smiled faintly. "Good. That means you're doing it for the right reason." Outside, the heat shimmered like a veil. Nora walked to her truck, pulled out a cooler, and handed him a small bag of crushed ice. "Keep this on the leg for a few minutes at a time. And here." She dug out a syringe and a vial. "Give it one dose every 12 hours. You can handle a needle? He smirked, the first real grin in days. Used to dig silver with dynamite? I think I'll manage. Nora laughed, short and bright. Fair enough. As she climbed back into the truck, she paused. You should give him a name. Already did, Sam said. Dusty. Good choice, she said, nodding toward the open desert. Everything out here's covered in dust. Might as well carry it with pride. She started the engine. The hum filled the air again, blending with the restless wind. Before she pulled away, she leaned out the window. I'll check in a few days. If you need help, call the clinic. Number's on the card. Sam took it, nodded once, and slipped it into his pocket. The truck rolled off, leaving a trail of swirling sand behind. Back inside, Dusty was still awake, eyes following him. Sam sat down beside it, wiping sweat from his brow. Don't get any ideas, he muttered. She's just doing her job. The foal blinked, slow and steady, as if it understood something he didn't. The fan rattled, stirring the hot air between them. Sam leaned back against the post and looked toward the door where the sun burned white through the cracks. You heard her, he said quietly. You want to live. You better start fighting. Dusty twitched an ear. Its breath came strong, even. Sam smiled faintly, then reached for the bucket, refilled it, halfway, and set it beside the foal. As it drank, he caught his reflection in the water's surface, lined, sunburned, but alive. He hadn't noticed before how long it had been since he'd looked himself in the eye. The desert wind pushed through the barn again, rattling the boards, carrying the scent of rain that hadn't arrived. Sam closed his eyes and listened. Somewhere far off, thunder mumbled across the horizon. It sounded almost like a promise. And for the first time since he'd buried his past, Sam found himself waiting, not for an end, but for whatever would come next. 3 days later, the desert had changed color again. What had been yellow-white heat now burned the color of rust, the air thick with dust kicked up by a restless wind. Sam sat on the porch steps with a mug of coffee that had gone cold hours ago. The barn door stood half open. From inside came the quiet, steady rhythm of life. A soft shuffle, a breath, a scrape. Dusty was moving a little more each day. Not walking, not yet, but pushing its front legs, testing the strength that pain had nearly stolen. Nora had been by the day before, checking the wound, replacing the wraps, leaving behind new medicine, and that faint smell of peppermint soap that lingered long after she left. Sam didn't mind it. The scent was clean, out of place here. It made the barn feel less like a graveyard, and more like a room someone still lived in. He rose, stretching the stiffness out of his shoulders, and went to check on Dusty. The foal blinked when he entered, ears twitching, nostrils flaring with the faintest excitement. Sam knelt, brushing a hand across its neck. You're looking better, kid. Or meaner. Hard to tell which. As he reached for the new roll of gauze, something caught his eye. A streak of dull red along the back leg, near the edge of the bandage. At first, he thought it was blood seeping through again. But the mark didn't glisten. It flaked under his thumb, leaving a faint smear of color on his skin. Paint. Old, sun-faded, but unmistakably red. He leaned closer, frowning. Where'd that come from? The foal shifted, uneasy. Sam stepped back, staring at the mark. It wasn't random. The line curved, almost like the smear left by a metal bumper against flesh. A memory surfaced. An old one, dry and sharp. The sound of gravel scattering under tires, A truck fishtailing near the ridge road 2 weeks back, a voice on the radio talking about a hit on a wild herd up north. He hadn't thought much of it then. Out here, things died every day, and people kept driving. He rubbed his jaw, the calluses on his fingers rough against his chin. "Damn," he whispered. "You've been through hell, haven't you?" When Nora's truck pulled into the yard that afternoon, he was waiting by the fence, holding the scrap of stained bandage. She climbed out, eyebrows raised. "You look like a man with bad news." "Found this on its leg," Sam said, handing it over. "Thought it was blood. It's paint." She turned it in the sunlight, lips tightening. "That's automotive enamel. Red oxide, maybe from an old Ford." Sam stared. "You can tell that just by looking?" "I've patched enough animals to know what hits them," she said. "There was a report last week. A truck hit a herd off State Road 21. The driver didn't stop." She paused, studying his face. "This must be one of them." He exhaled slowly. The desert wind lifted the brim of his hat, tossing grit across the yard. "Hell of a thing," he said finally. "Some people got no business behind a wheel." Nora nodded, but her eyes stayed on him a little longer than necessary. "You all right?" "Yeah, just seems like every damn thing out here's got scars." He looked toward the barn. Living or not. Inside, Dusty whinnied softly, as if answering. Nora smiled faintly. "That means it's healing." Sam wasn't so sure. Something about that mark gnawed at him. He followed her back into the barn, watching as she worked. She cleaned the wound again, humming under her breath. "See this line?" she said, pointing to the edge of the scar. "It's straight, too clean for a fence or a rock. That's man-made, maybe from a bumper." Sam's stomach turned. "So someone hit it, then left it." "Looks that way." She met his eyes. "But it crawled this far on its own. That's not nothing." He didn't reply. He just kept staring at the wound. The color of the dried paint burned into his vision. The rest of the day passed in silence. Nora left at dusk, promising to return in a few days. Sam stood by the truck as she drove off, the setting sun flashing red against her taillights, the same shade as the streak on Dusty's leg. That night, he couldn't sleep. The air hung heavy, still and dry. He sat in the barn with the lantern low, the light flickering over Dusty's resting form. "Someone did this to you," he said softly. "Some son of a bitch who didn't even stop." The words came out rough, full of something he hadn't felt in years, anger that wasn't aimed at himself. The foal shifted, letting out a faint grunt. Sam reached over, touching its mane. "You keep fighting, Dusty. We'll show 'em what they left behind." When morning came, he loaded the truck for town. Diesel, feed, maybe a few questions answered. The drive was long, the road empty. He passed the ridge where the herd had been hit. The sand still bore faint tracks, grooves of tires, darker patches where something heavy had dragged. He pulled over, stepped out, and knelt beside the marks. The wind moved across the open land, whispering secrets he didn't want to hear. Under a clump of sagebrush, he found a piece of broken headlight glass, still tinted red. He turned it in his hand, and sunlight flared through it, sharp, clean, and cruelly familiar. His chest tightened. There was only one person he knew who drove a red truck like that. The thought froze him in place, then sent a slow burn through his gut. "Luke," he breathed. He stood there for a long time, the heat pressing down, his mind spinning through years of silence and guilt. His son had left 5 years ago after their last fight. The one about leaving the ranch, about responsibility, about mistakes neither had forgiven. Luke had been reckless even then, but not cruel. Sam wanted to believe that. Needed to. He pocketed the shard of glass and drove back home, the steering wheel slick under his palms. Every mile felt heavier. Back in the barn, Dusty greeted him with a soft nicker. He knelt, running a hand along its neck, feeling the steady pulse beneath. "If it was him," he whispered, "I'll make it right. One way or another." The foal blinked, eyes warm in the low light. Sam sighed, leaning his head against the stall post. The truth sat on his shoulders like a stone, but he didn't push it away. The desert never hid its scars. It wore them out loud, a reminder that even broken land could remember everything that hurt it. As the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in shades of fire and ash, Sam whispered, "Maybe some wounds ain't meant to fade. Maybe they're just there to keep us honest." Behind him, Dusty shifted and let out a quiet, steady breath. The sound filled the barn, soft and alive, a heartbeat against the silence. Sam closed his eyes and let the weight of the moment settle, knowing that the next step, whatever it was, would change everything. The wind didn't move that day. It just hung over the valley, thick with the smell of hot iron and silence. The desert felt like a held breath that never came out. Sam woke before dawn, though he couldn't say he'd slept. He'd been up half the night, turning that shard of red glass over in his hands, the edges biting his fingers until they bled faintly. He'd scrubbed them clean before feeding Dusty, but the sting stayed, reminding him of things he'd rather forget. He moved slow through the morning. The coffee pot hissed on the stove, water boiling faster than it should. The heat inside the house matched the heat outside. By 8 o'clock, the thermometer nailed to the porch already read 103. He filled 2 buckets, one for himself, one for the foal, and stepped into the glare. The sun hit him like a slap. The world shimmered white and gold, each breath hot enough to burn his throat. In the barn, Dusty was restless. The bandages around its legs were dark with sweat, the wound edges tight and scabbed. Sam poured a trickle of water into the trough, careful not to spill. The foal drank fast, almost too fast, splashing the surface, drops flying against the boards. He let it drink, then drew the pail away and wiped his brow. The last of the water glistened at the bottom. It wasn't enough. Not for long. The well was coughing up dust again, the diesel tank was nearly dry, and the world outside the fence shimmered, like a stove turned too high. "Not much left for either of us," he said, crouching down beside the animal. Dusty nudged his arm, muzzle warm against his sleeve. "You got a lot of nerve, kid," he whispered. "Crawling all the way out here just to make me remember what it's like to care." The air thickened as the day stretched on. He patched a section of roof, fixed a hinge, anything to keep his hands moving. By late afternoon, the sky had turned pale and strange, the light almost silver. The kind of color that told him heat would break soon. But not gently. The desert never gave without taking something first. He went out to the well again, hoping for a miracle. The pump handle shrieked, echoing across the yard. A few drops fell into the bucket, red with rust. He stared at them, jaw tightening. That was it. No more water. No more mercy from the earth. Back in the barn, Dusty tried to stand again, front legs braced, hind legs dragging. The sight tore something open in Sam. "Easy," he said, rushing forward. "Don't push it." But the foal didn't stop. It strained until its breath came in sharp wheezes, then collapsed, chest heaving. Sam knelt, hand against its neck, feeling the thready pulse beneath. "You stubborn little fool," he said, voice cracking. "You'll kill yourself trying." He stayed beside it until the tremors eased. The air in the barn was hot enough to shimmer. Even the fan had given up, blades barely turning. Sam tore off his hat and wiped the sweat from his face. He could taste salt, copper, and something else, fear. Outside, thunder rolled somewhere beyond the hills, too far to mean rain. Just sound, empty and cruel. Sam stood, pacing. He thought about driving to town for supplies, but the truck's fuel gauge was kissing empty. Eli was 30 miles of open road, 30 miles he might not make back if the engine overheated. He thought of calling Nora, but the phone line crackled with static every time he tried. The desert was cutting him off again, piece by piece, the way it always did. By sunset, the light turned amber, thick and syrupy. Dust rose in sheets from the ground. Sam stood in the doorway, staring west, half expecting to see Luke's old red truck crest the ridge. He didn't know what he'd do if it did. Maybe scream, maybe forgive, maybe both. The horizon stayed empty. He went back inside. Dusty was awake again, its eyes glimmering faintly in the dim light. He knelt, reached for the blanket, and pressed it over the foal's body. "We'll find more water tomorrow," he said. The lie was small, but necessary. "You just hang on tonight." The foal exhaled, a soft sigh that trembled through the air. Sam sat beside it, his back against the post. The lantern flickered, shadows crawling across the walls. The air felt too heavy to breathe. Sweat ran down his temple, his shirt sticking to his skin. Outside, the insects had gone quiet. The desert only made that sound when it was, holding something back. Hours passed. The darkness thickened until even the stars disappeared behind a haze of heat. The silence pressed on his chest like a weight. He dozed, and woke, dozed again, caught between dreams and memory. In one, he saw his wife standing at the doorway, holding a glass of water out to him. In another, he saw Luke at 17, laughing as he revved the truck too close to the corral fence. The sound of the engine bled into the low moan of the wind. He jerked awake, heart pounding. A faint whimper broke the stillness. Dusty was shivering. Sam scrambled for the ice bag Nora had left, now nothing but a damp rag. He pressed it against the wound anyway, whispering, "You're gonna make it. You hear me?" The foal's breath rasped against his sleeve. Its skin was hot to the touch. Fever rising. Sam reached for the bottle of antibiotics, fingers trembling, and filled the syringe. He found the spot along the neck, pushed the needle in, and watched the medicine vanish. Afterward, he slumped beside the animal, exhausted. He could feel his own pulse hammering. "You're not dying tonight," he said. "I've had enough ghosts." The foal's breathing steadied, little by little. Sam stayed there, head bowed. Outside, the wind began again. Not cool, but restless, swirling grit against the barn walls. The smell of ozone drifted through the cracks, sharp and electric. The first flicker of lightning danced far off to the north. He looked up, catching it through the slats of the roof. "Maybe tomorrow," he whispered. "Maybe the sky'll finally give." He didn't sleep again. Not really. The hours bled together. He sat with Dusty through the night, counting the seconds between thunder and light. Near dawn, he felt the air change. The temperature dropped, just slightly, but enough to make him breathe deeper. The horizon softened from black to the color of ash. He rose, joints aching, and stepped outside. The desert smelled different. Still dry, still scorched, but carrying the faintest hint of moisture, the promise of rain, or the lie of it. He turned his face upward. The clouds were bruised purple, the wind shifting east. He smiled, small and tired. "You keep fighting, kid," he murmured. "Looks like the world might try again." When he walked back into the barn, the foal was awake, eyes following him. He poured the last bit of water into its dish. It drank slow this time, calm, deliberate. Sam sat down beside it and leaned his head against the stall post, the fatigue washing over him like a tide. Outside, the thunder faded, leaving only the soft whisper of wind against tin. The long night was over, not because morning had come, but because neither of them had quit breathing. By the next afternoon, the air had turned the color of brass. The storm that had teased the horizon broke apart before it reached them, leaving only a thin smell of rain that never saw. Sam sat on the porch, hat low over his eyes. Glass of lukewarm water in his hand. His body ached from the night before, but it was the kind of ache that reminded him he was still alive. Inside the barn, Dusty slept beneath the half-turned fan, its breathing slow, its fever easing at last. Sam had checked the wound that morning. The infection was pulling back, pink tissue forming where rot had been. Maybe they'd both make it through the week after all. He was just about to head back inside when he heard it. The rumble of an engine on the road. Not the steady growl of a ranch truck. Not Nora's soft pickup. It was deeper, rougher, carrying that familiar stutter he hadn't heard in years. His gut tightened before his mind caught up. A red truck crested the rise, dust swirling behind it like smoke. It slowed near the gate, idled, then shut off. The silence that followed was heavier than thunder. The driver's door opened. A man stepped out, lean, sunburned, same stubborn jawline that Sam saw in the mirror every morning. Luke. For a moment, Sam just stared. Time folded in on itself, 5 years vanishing and crashing back all at once. The last memory he had of his son was a slammed door, a shouted curse, and the sound of gravel spinning under tires as the boy drove away. He'd watched the taillights disappear into the dark and told himself he didn't care. He'd been lying ever since. Luke hesitated at the fence, one hand gripping the post. "Hey, Dad," he said finally. The words were quiet, awkward, like he'd borrowed them from someone else. Sam stood, heart hammering. "That your truck?" Luke glanced over his shoulder at the dented red hood, the missing headlight. "Yeah." Sam's throat went dry. The shard of glass in his pocket felt suddenly heavier. "You came all this way just to show it off?" Luke shifted, jaw tight. "I came to talk." "Talk?" Sam's voice cracked like a whip. "Now you got words?" He took a step down the porch stairs, boots scuffing against the dust. "After 5 years, after you tore out of here like the whole damn world owed you, what could you possibly have left to say?" Luke didn't answer right away. He looked past his father toward the barn, where the faint shadow of movement caught his eye. "That foal," he said softly. "It's still alive?" Sam froze. "You knew about it?" Luke nodded once, shame flickering across his face. "I hit the herd out by Dry Creek 2 weeks ago. Didn't see him until it was too late. I stopped. I tried to find the one that was hurt, but he swallowed hard. It was gone by the time I got back. I thought coyotes got it. I've been driving around ever since looking. Heard someone out this way was keeping a foal alive. I prayed it wasn't mine." Sam stared at him, the world narrowing to the sound of wind between them. "You prayed it wasn't yours?" Luke met his eyes. "Because that would mean I left it to die." Sam's anger cracked then, replaced by something colder. Grief, maybe, or understanding that came too late. He turned toward the barn. "Come on, you better see what your mistake looks like up close." Inside, the air was cooler, darker. Dusty lifted its head as they entered, eyes wide, alert. Luke stopped near the doorway, staring at the small, scarred body. The paint streak was still visible along its hind leg, a dull red, the color of guilt. He reached out a hand, but Sam's voice stopped him. "Careful. It remembers." Luke dropped his arm. "You saved it." Sam shook his head. "It saved itself. I just gave it a place to fall." For a while, neither spoke. The fan hummed. A beam of sunlight slipped through a crack in the roof, painting the dust in gold. Then Luke said quietly, "I didn't come to make excuses. I couldn't sleep knowing what I'd done. I thought maybe if I could find it, fix it somehow." "You can't fix this," Sam cut in. His voice was tired, not cruel. "You hit something that trusted the world to be kind, and it wasn't. That kind of break doesn't go away." Luke nodded, eyes glistening. "I know." Sam looked at him for a long moment, then turned back to the foal. "But it's still breathing, so maybe there's something left worth trying for." Luke stepped closer. Dusty watched him, ears twitching, nostrils flaring. Then slowly, it reached out and touched its muzzle to his hand. Luke froze, eyes wide, breath catching. The gesture was small, tentative, but real. Sam felt something in his chest loosen, the tightness that had been there for years easing just a little. "Looks like it forgives easier than people do," Sam said. Luke let out a shaky laugh. "Guess I don't deserve that." "Maybe not," Sam said. "But you're here. That's a start." They spent the rest of the afternoon working in silence. Luke helped patch the roof, fetched clean water from a spring a few miles north that Nora had mentioned once. When he came back, Sam caught himself watching his son move. The same stride, the same stubborn set to his shoulders. Time hadn't taken that from him. At sunset, they sat outside the barn, the desert painted in red and gold. The heat had finally broken. A faint breeze moved through the grass, whispering over the land. Luke turned the empty canteen in his hands. "I shouldn't have left the way I did," he said. "You were right. I wasn't ready for the world." Sam didn't look at him. "You were right, too. I didn't know how to let go." Silence settled again, but it was softer now, less sharp. Behind them, Dusty let out a low nicker, testing its voice. Both men turned to look. The foal was standing, wobbly, trembling, but standing. For a heartbeat, the world held still. Then Luke exhaled, half laugh, half sob. "Would you look at that?" Sam stood, wiping at his eyes with the back of his hand. "He's tougher than both of us." The foal took one shaky step, then another, before collapsing gently onto the hay. Sam knelt beside it, checking its breathing, then glanced up at Luke. "You still driving that death trap of yours?" "Yeah," Luke said, confused. "Good," Sam replied, standing. "Tomorrow we'll go into town. Get you some real work. This ranch could use another pair of hands." Luke blinked. You mean that? Sam looked toward the fading light, the horizon swallowed in shadow. If that damn horse can learn to stand again, maybe we can too. They didn't speak after that. The sky turned violet, then black, and the stars came out sharp as glass. In the barn, Dusty's breathing blended with the hum of crickets, steady and alive. For the first time in 5 years, Sam didn't dread the sound of another person's footsteps in his yard. It felt like coming home to something he hadn't known he'd lost. Morning came without warning, a pale, washed-out dawn that barely separated sky from dust. The air was still, but the silence felt different now. It wasn't the emptiness that had haunted Sam's ranch for years. It was the kind of quiet that waits, listening for something new to begin. Luke was already up when Sam stepped out of the house. He stood near the barn fence, holding a mug of black coffee, eyes fixed on the open land. The red truck was parked beside the gate, dusted white from the road. Its dents caught the early light, and for a strange moment Sam thought it looked smaller than he remembered. Less like a weapon, more like an old mistake that had finally stopped running. "You're up early," Sam said, his voice gravelly but calm. Luke shrugged. "Hard to sleep out here. Too many crickets." "Better than sirens," Sam replied. They shared a short smile. Awkward, but real. The kind of smile men used when they weren't sure how to say what mattered. When they stepped into the barn, Dusty lifted its head, ears flicking toward them. The foal's eyes were clear this morning, the fever gone. Sam noticed right away that it wasn't just lying there waiting. It was bracing its forelegs again, testing weight. He stopped in his tracks. Luke whispered, "He's gonna try." Sam nodded slowly. "Looks like it." They stood there, barely breathing. The foal grunted, pushed with its front legs, trembling with effort. For a moment, it looked hopeless, the back legs dragging like dead weight. But then something inside it shifted. Muscles that had forgotten how to move remembered again. Dusty strained, sweat darkening the fur along its neck, and then, with a small cry that sounded almost human, it lifted itself halfway. "Come on, boy," Sam said softly, voice breaking. "You've got it. Just one more." Luke stepped closer, his hands tightening on the stall rail. The foal trembled, quivering all over, but it didn't fall. Instead, it locked its knees and stood, shaking, fragile, but upright. The air in the barn went still, and Sam realized he'd stopped, breathing altogether. After what felt like forever, Dusty took one step forward. A single, wobbling step that left a print in the straw. Then another. 2 shaky strides before it slumped down again, chest heaving. But it didn't sound like pain this time. It sounded like triumph. Luke let out a choked laugh. "He's walking." Sam crouched beside the foal, hand on its mane. "He's trying," he corrected softly. Then, after a pause, he looked up at his son. "That's more than I could say for either of us for a long time." They didn't talk for a while after that. They didn't need to. The wind moved through the cracks in the barn walls, carrying the smell of hay and rust. Sam went about refilling the water trough, while Luke checked the feed. It felt natural. 2 men working side by side, the rhythm easy, unspoken. The kind of peace that doesn't announce itself. It just settles in and stays. Around mid-morning, Nora's green pickup appeared at the far edge of the road, dust trailing behind it. Sam waved her in. When she stepped out, the first thing she noticed was the look on both their faces. "What happened?" she asked, smiling as she crossed the yard. Luke pointed toward the barn. "You might want to see for yourself." Inside, Nora crouched beside Dusty. "Well, look at you," she whispered, brushing her hand down the foal's neck. "Standing already, huh?" The animal nickered softly, leaning into her touch. "I've seen colts take months to do what you just did, sweetheart. You've got more grit than most people I know." Sam leaned against the post, arms folded, watching them. There was pride in his eyes, not the loud kind, just the steady warmth of a man who'd nearly forgotten what pride felt like. Nora looked back at him, her smile gentle. "You've done good work here, Sam." He shook his head. He did the hard part. She studied him a moment longer, then turned to Luke. "You must be the son he never talks about." Luke blinked. "He talks about me?" "Not in words," Nora said with a grin. "But some silences are louder than speech." Sam rolled his eyes. "You a vet or a philosopher today?" "Both," she said. "Now let's get that leg checked before your miracle falls apart." While she examined the wound, Luke stepped outside to fetch fresh water. When he came back, he found Sam sitting on the porch steps again, watching the horizon. The sky had softened to a pale blue, clouds forming at the edges. The first real clouds in months. Luke handed him a cup of water, and they sat quietly, listening to the fan hum from inside. After a long silence, Luke said, "You ever think you'd see rain again?" Sam took a sip, then shrugged. "I stopped expecting things. That way, when they come, it feels like grace." Luke nodded. "I used to think grace was for people who deserved it." "It's not," Sam said. "It's for the rest of us, the ones who keep getting up when we don't know why." From inside, Nora called out, "Legs healing clean. Keep the bandages off tomorrow and let him feel the ground." "Will do," Sam replied, voice carrying just enough pride to make Luke smile. Later, as the day slipped toward evening, they opened the barn doors to let the light spill across the straw. Dusty stood again, slow and steady this time, walking 3 small circles around the trough before stopping beside Sam. The foal pressed its muzzle against his arm, warm breath soft on his skin. "Guess he likes you," Luke said. Sam stroked the side of the animal's neck. "Guess I like him too." They watched as Dusty wandered toward the open door, sunlight wrapping around its body like a promise. For a second, Sam thought about the day it had crawled through the dirt to his porch, broken and silent. That memory still hurt, but not like it used to. Now it felt like the beginning of something instead of the end of everything. Nora came to stand beside them, her arms folded. "You two look like men who just found a reason to breathe again." Sam smiled faintly. "Yeah, maybe we did." The wind shifted then, carrying with it a single drop of cool air, like the whisper of rain waiting just beyond sight. Luke tilted his head, listening. "You hear that?" Sam nodded. "Thunder. Way off." "It'll come," Luke said, almost to himself. "Eventually." Sam looked at him, at Nora, at the colt still standing in the golden light, and something inside him settled. "Yeah," he said quietly. "It always does." The clouds rolled closer as the sun sank lower, the light turning everything copper and soft. The barn glowed like a lantern against the darkening land. And in that still, perfect moment, father, son, and a creature that had once been broken, stood together, breathing the same dry air, waiting for the sound of rain that would one day find them. 2 weeks passed, and the desert began to soften. The days were still hot, but the kind of heat that hummed instead of hissed. Gentler somehow, as if the land itself had stopped fighting. Sam noticed it first in the mornings. The air wasn't razor-sharp anymore, and the wind carried the smell of something damp beneath the dust. Hope, maybe. Or memory. He and Luke worked side by side now. The silence between them changed. It wasn't empty anymore. It was the easy quiet of two men who didn't need to fill the air with apologies. They built new troughs, patched the roof again, even cleared the fence line so the herd from the neighboring valley could pass through when grazing got thin. Nora came by every few days, checking on Dusty and pretending not to notice that Sam always poured her a cup of coffee before she asked. Dusty was walking now, still favoring the injured leg, but strong enough to nudge Sam's shoulder when he came too close with the feed bucket. The colt's coat had grown in brighter, the dull copper shining gold in the afternoon light. Luke laughed the first time it chased a tumbleweed across the pen, all awkward limbs and pure joy. "Guess you were right," he told his father. "He's tougher than we are." Sam grinned, but his gaze drifted toward the dry well behind the barn. It had been the heart of the ranch once, back when the land was still forgiving. Now it was just a scar in the earth, rimmed with weeds and silence. But something about the shifting air made him wonder if maybe, buried deep, there was still water. That night, after Nora left, and the sky bled into violet, he sat on the porch and listened to the wind. "Used to be," he said quietly. "You could smell water long before you saw it." Luke looked up from the tools he was cleaning. "You think it's still down there?" "Only one way to find out." Sam rose, joints creaking, and grabbed a shovel from the wall. Luke laughed softly. "You're serious?" "Dead serious. Tomorrow we dig." When morning came, they started early, before the heat could turn vicious. The sun hadn't fully climbed the ridge when the first clang of metal on stone echoed across the yard. The sound felt like a prayer, harsh but hopeful. They took turns, Sam steady, Luke strong, and by noon they'd cleared 6 feet of packed clay. Dusty watched from the fence line, ears flicking every time the shovel struck rock. "You think this'll work?" Luke asked, leaning on the handle. Sam wiped his brow, sweat tracing pale lines through the dirt on his skin. "You keep digging long enough, something's bound to give. Could be dirt, could be your back." They both laughed, the sound strange and good. By late afternoon, the pit had deepened, and the earth began to darken at the edges. The soil grew cool under their hands, damp to the touch. Luke dropped to his knees, scooping a handful, sniffing it. "Smells like rain," he said. Sam climbed down beside him, pressing his palm against the wall of the hole. It was cold. "We're close." They worked until sunset, each strike slower, heavier. Then, with one last swing, Luke's shovel hit something that didn't sound like stone. It sounded hollow. The ground gave a faint sigh, and a trickle of dark water slipped from the wall, running down into the pit. "Dad," Luke whispered. "You see that?" Sam didn't answer. He was staring at the water spreading through the dirt, tiny bubbles forming where it touched air. He scooped a handful, lifted it to his lips. It was warm, metallic, and tasted of iron and survival. He laughed. A short, cracked laugh that startled them both. "I'll be damned," he said. "She's still breathing." They worked fast then, shoring the sides, clearing the channel, guiding the water into an old trough. By nightfall it was running steady, thin but real. The well had come back to life. When Nora arrived the next morning, the first thing she saw was the damp earth glinting in the light. She set down her bag and smiled. "Looks sohen, like you found more than luck." Sam nodded, handing her a tin cup. "Found patience," he said. "Didn't know I still had any." She took a sip, then glanced toward Luke, who was repairing the pump handle. "And maybe forgiveness, too." Sam looked at his son, bent over the task with grease on his hands, humming low and off-key. He thought about the years between them. The silence, the anger, the nights when the only voice he'd heard was his own regret. Now, that sound had been replaced by the rhythm of shovels, laughter, and a colt's gentle breathing. That afternoon, Dusty approached the new trough cautiously. It sniffed the edge, then lowered its head and drank, water dripping from its muzzle in silver threads. Sam watched, his heart heavy and full at once. He knelt beside it, running his hand along its neck. "There you go, kid. Took us long enough." Luke stood behind them, holding a camera. "Smile," he said. Sam frowned. "For what?" "For proof," Luke answered. "So when people say nothing grows out here, we can show them they're wrong." The flash went off, catching Dusty's reflection in the water. For a moment, it looked like two of them, one born of earth, one of light, both alive. That evening, the three of them sat by the well. The air smelled of wet soil and sage. The first real stars blinked through the clouds, and for once, the desert didn't feel endless. It felt held, like it belonged to something larger than loss. Luke leaned back, resting his hat over his face. "You ever think it's weird?" he said. "How it takes breaking something open to find what's still alive underneath?" Sam smiled faintly. "That's not weird, son. That's life." The wind moved softly across the yard, rustling the dry grass. Dusty lifted its head, water dripping from its chin, and let out a small sound. A note so clear, it might have been a song. Nora looked toward the barn, then at Sam. "He's singing," she said. Sam nodded, his eyes glinting in the lamplight. "Yeah, guess we all are." For a long time, no one spoke. The well murmured, the stars grew brighter, and the air carried that clean, impossible scent of renewal. It wasn't rain. It was something quieter, more honest, the kind of peace that doesn't need to be loud to last. Sam leaned back against the post, watching the colt, his son, and the woman who had somehow wandered into their story and refused to leave. The night wrapped around them, warm and forgiving. He closed his eyes, letting the sound of water fill the spaces where guilt used to live. And somewhere deep beneath their feet, the desert heart kept beating, slow and sure, promising that even here, where everything once died of thirst, life could begin again. By early September, the desert had learned how to breathe again. Rain had come twice that month, small, stubborn showers that fell in threads and vanished before they touched the hills. But it was enough. The soil, longer cracked beneath Sam's boots, and a fine film of green clung to the edges of the road, as if life were sneaking back in under the cover of dust. The ranch looked different now. The barn's patched roof no longer sagged. The troughs gleamed with clean water drawn from the revived well. There were new fences, a fresh coat of white paint on the gate, and a wooden sign Luke had carved himself. The letters were uneven, but proud. Dust Haven Ranch, for those who still crawl. Sam stood in front of it one morning, coffee steaming in his hand. the sunrise pouring over the land like melted gold. He smiled, a quiet smile that didn't ask for witnesses. Behind him came the sound of hooves on dry dirt. Dusty trotted across the yard, its stride awkward but certain. The scar on its leg had faded to a faint silver line, no longer a wound, just a reminder. When it reached him, it nudged his shoulder, demanding attention. "Morning, partner," Sam murmured, running a hand through its mane. The colt's coat gleamed copper under the light. "Looks like you're faster every day." Luke stepped out of the barn, wiping grease from his hands. "He's been chasing every bird that flies too low," he said, laughing. "Might start thinking he can grow wings next." "Let him," Sam replied. "The whole damn world told him he couldn't walk. Might as well dream big." Nora's truck arrived mid-morning, tires crunching softly along the dirt path. She climbed out, wearing her same dusty hat, a basket of tools in one hand, a paper bag in the other. "Morning, gentlemen," she said. "I brought you some of my famous peach pies, and worming paste for your fearless idiot there." Luke grinned. "The pie's for us, right?" She tossed him the paper bag. "You wish." They sat under the porch for breakfast, sharing the pie straight from the pan with spoons that didn't match. The air smelled of baked peaches and warm hay. Dusty stood nearby, ears flicking, watching every bite as if it was part of the conversation. Sam leaned back in his chair, feeling something he hadn't felt in years: ease. "You know," Nora said between bites, "most folks would have sold this place and started over somewhere easier." Sam took a slow sip of coffee. "Never cared much for easy." Luke nodded. "Guess that runs in the family." She smiled. "It's not stubbornness, it's faith, even if you don't call it that." The wind shifted then, carrying the soft creak of the well handle turning on its own. The bucket swayed, full to the brim. Water splashed onto the dirt, darkening it instantly. Nora stood, watching. "Looks like it's holding steady." "Yeah," Sam said. "Guess it was waiting for someone to believe in it again." The afternoon passed slow and golden. Sam fixed a gate hinge, while Luke painted the barn doors a deep red, his way, maybe, of turning a painful color into something that meant life instead of loss. Nora set up a small clinic stall inside the barn for animals that wandered in sick or half-starved from the ridge. The word had spread. Already, 2 stray dogs and an old mule from a nearby farm were resting in the shade. Near sunset, Sam found himself alone by the well, watching the horizon. The sky had turned into a wash of pink and amber. Dusty grazed nearby, tail flicking lazily. The faint clatter of tools drifted from the barn, where Luke was finishing the paint job. Everything around him felt both fragile and permanent at once, like it could disappear tomorrow or last forever. He didn't care which, so long as he had this one moment to know it existed. Nora joined him, wiping her hands on her jeans. "Place looks good," she said. "Better than it deserves," Sam replied. He looked down into the well, where the reflection of the sky shimmered back at him. "Funny thing about water, it doesn't stay where you put it. It finds its own way." "That's what makes it beautiful," she said. "Same as people." Sam chuckled softly. "You always got a sermon ready." "Maybe," she said, smiling. "But I think you finally started listening." Dusty raised its head, ears pricking at something distant. A few drops of rain spattered against the well rim. 1, 2, then a steady whisper. It wasn't much, but enough to turn the dust to dark clay beneath their boots. Sam lifted his face to it, eyes half closed. "Well, I'll be," he murmured. "You finally kept your promise, old sky." By the time the rain passed, the air had cooled. The desert glowed, alive and washed clean. Luke stepped out, hair plastered with water, laughing like a boy again. "Told you it had come." Sam looked at him, really looked, and saw the same fire in his son that had once burned in himself before the years and loss had dimmed it. "Yeah," he said quietly. "Guess I just needed to believe it still could." That night, they lit a lantern and hung it outside the barn, letting its glow spill over the yard. Nora and Luke stayed for supper: beans, bread, and what was left of the pie. Afterward, they sat together on the porch, saying little. The world hummed with soft noises, frogs calling from puddles, the steady drip from the eaves, the faint shuffle of hooves inside. Every sound was alive again. As the moon climbed, Sam stood and walked out to the fence. Dusty followed, pressing its muzzle against his shoulder. He rested a hand on its neck, the warmth steady beneath his palm. "You did it," he whispered. "You dragged yourself through hell just to live. And I guess I followed you out." The foal snorted, head tilting as if it understood. Sam smiled, the kind that reaches the eyes. "We made a deal that day, didn't we? You'd fight to live, and I'd figure out how to start." Behind him, Nora called softly, "Sam, come on back. It's late." "In a minute," he said. His gaze lingered on the land stretching into darkness. "Just want to remember this." He looked down once more into the well. The moonlight shimmered across the water's surface, and for an instant it reflected all three of them: man, horse, and the faint halo of a lantern's flame. The image trembled with every ripple, as if breathing. Sam exhaled. "Looks like the world's still got a pulse after all." From somewhere deep inside the barn came a soft sound, Dusty's answering whinny, low and content, echoing into the night. It carried out across the desert, across the dry fields, and disappeared into the distance, where maybe someone lonely would hear it and remember what hope sounded like. Sam turned back toward the house, the glow from the porch spilling across the yard. Nora stood in the doorway, Luke beside her, both framed in gold light. He walked toward them, slow but certain, each step heavier with peace instead of regret. Tomorrow there would be work again, more fences to mend, animals to tend, a future to build. But tonight, for the first time in years, he let himself rest. He belonged again to the land, to his son, to the small, stubborn heartbeat of a place that refused to die. As he reached the porch, the rain started again, soft and warm, soaking the earth. Dusty lifted its head to the sky, eyes bright, and Sam smiled. "That's it, kid," he said, voice barely above a whisper. "Breathe it in. You earned every drop." The lantern flickered in the wind, its flame bending but never going out. And in that quiet, endless stretch of Nevada night, Sam Whitaker finally understood. Redemption didn't come like a storm. It came like this: slow, gentle, and lasting, one heartbeat at a time. If this story touched your heart, tell me what part stayed with you the most. Leave a comment below. I read every one of them. And if you'd like to hear more true-to-life stories of people and animals finding their way back to hope, make sure to subscribe. I've got another story waiting just for you.